Welcome back everyone to the next part of our glove making tutorial. So you should have now finished your little finger and knit just that extra little bit as we did in the previous tutorial. So we're now ready to work on the ring finger, this one here. So to do that, what we've got to do, because obviously what we did before is we put all of our stitches back on the needle just to knit that little bit of a space that we've got here that's between the bottom of our little finger and the bottom of our ring finger. We've got that extra bit of fabric that needs to be knit. So all of the stitches went back on, we've knit those few rows, and we're now ready to work the ring finger. So what we're going to do is the fingers are worked with a number of stitches on the front needle and then a number of stitches on the back needle. So we will remove the rest of the stitches onto waste yarn. So the first thing I've got to do is, and bear in mind your numbers might be different to mine because it could be a different pattern, but I've got to knit, getting that little finger out of the way, I've got to knit 8 for the sort of front of my ring finger, if you like. So we knit 8 stitches. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8. I'm then going to backwards loop cast on 1 stitch. So just, there we go, 1 stitch. And now I need to remove, in my case it's 30 stitches. So what I do is I push these stitches well onto that needle so there's no risk of them flying off. So I'm just going to remove, as we did before, I'm going to remove 30 stitches. So that should, in theory, leave me with 8, 2, 4, 6, and it does, 8 stitches. So we know that we've done the correct sort of calculations there because we have got 8 stitches, or I have in my case, on the other needle. So now all I'm going to do is knit across those 8 stitches. When you backwards loop cast on, I find that if you pull too tight, it's tightening up that loop, but it's on the cable rather than the needle, obviously, so it makes it very tight when we go back to it on the next round. So I just try to keep my yarn just a little bit looser, just to make sure that that backwards loop cast on isn't, gripping like crazy. So I'm just going to work those stitches. There we go, and turn. So now I'm actually ready just to knit up the finger. So because we're not, in this case, we don't need to pick up any stitches down here at the base of the little finger because we actually knit those few rows. So that's not necessary when we're knitting the ring finger. All we need to do is just knit the correct number of rows or measurement that your pattern tells you to do. Do the same decreases that you did on your other finger, and then that'll be that one complete. So what I'll do is I will quickly knit that finger, and then we will come back and then I'll show you how to work the other 2 fingers. So I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I finished off the ring finger and we're now ready to work the last 2 fingers. So what I need to do now is we need to put some stitches back on the needle to work the middle finger. So in my case, I'm going to use 7 stitches from the front and 7 stitches from the back. And then I'm going to pick up stitches here in the gap, and I'm also going to backwards loop cast on. So we're going to use all of those techniques that we've done previously, but we're using them all in this case at the same time, if you like. So what I'm going to do first of all is place 7 stitches back on my needle first of all. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So obviously my numbers could be different to yours, but I've got 7 stitches on there. I'm now just going to pull my needle through so that I've got that pointing in the right direction, because this is the front of the glove, this is the start of my round on this side where your needles are facing towards the fingers that we've already knit. So what I'm now going to do is flip this around, and we need to find the last 7 stitches on this side. So you just need to count backwards basically. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's that one there that I need to start with. That's the 7th before the end. And then just pop those 7 stitches on as well. 5, 6, and that last little stitch always hides. You can see it just totally disappears. Just pull your yarn and it reappears there, look. So we've got the stitches back on the needles now, so obviously we need to get that waste yarn out. So what I do is I just take my tapestry needle and then go in here, pull up kind of a little loop, and then just pull the waste yarn out of those stitches that are back on your needle, but obviously leaving it on the rest of your stitches. So that's that side. And then we're going to do the same thing on this side. So just pull up a loop at the back there and then pull that waste yarn off. So there we go. I've got the stitches back on the needle now for the middle finger. So what we're going to do is reattach the yarn. We're going to pick up some stitches in that gap, and then we're going to backwards loop cast on as well. So let's get our yarn. So we have done this before, but I'll just show you one more time what I do. So I kind of flatten out that finger in the other direction. And we're going to use the back needle, pull out your back needle as if you were starting to knit magic loop like normal. And then as we did before, we need to pick up 2 stitches in this gap here. So what I tend to do is, first of all, I don't worry if I'm going to make a hole. If I'm going to leave a hole, I just don't worry, because we can very easily sew that up, and that's just exactly what we're going to do in the last tutorial. But to sort of minimise it, what I do is I look for the stitches down here that don't follow up. So you can see we've got a stitch, a V-stitch running all the way down here, but then this one kind of splits off. So that's where I'm going to pick up my first stitch, and I always make sure I go under 2 loops. So I'm going to pop my needle in, leave a tail of yarn, make sure you've left a good tail so that we can weave those ends in and close up any holes. Just loop that over as we did before and pull through, and that's the first stitch picked up. And then I'll go and pick up the one that's next to it. So in my case that's that one here, and you can see I've gone under 2 loops again. Make sure you don't knit with your tail. Dan likes to do that. And then pick up that stitch as well. Oh, looking at that, I've actually gone under 3 loops, I think. There we go, it's there. I think that's right, yep. So yarn round. It can be a bit fiddly, just go steady. There we go, we've got 2 now in that gap. Now you can see there is still, from where my stitch is here to where I've picked up, there is still a gap. And you could pick up more stitches if you wanted to, and I did think about that. But you'd have to pick up the stitches and then decrease them back down, otherwise your finger would be too wide. So I came to the conclusion that actually I don't really mind if there is a little hole there, because I'm happy to sew it up. So that's the way that I sort of go about it. So now what I've got to do is backwards loop cast on 2 stitches as well. So that will help enclose the gap, because we're adding a couple of stitches here, but I do find that you do still get a little hole. So I'm just going to backwards loop cast on 2 stitches, that's 1 and 2, and now I can just carry on knitting. So make sure that when you knit that first stitch, I kind of shuffle all my stitches really close to the first stitch that I'm knitting, just to minimise any gapping, and knit that first stitch and the next stitch quite tightly. And there we go. And now we can just carry on and finish knitting that round. So we get to the end of that first needle, and then we can flip over, push your tail inside as we did before. So just pop that inside, get down, and then push those stitches back on. And now I can finish that round. So now you can just, all I will do now is knit the relevant number of rounds, or centimetres, however you want to work it. Oh, I've got a split stitch there, let's just sort that out. There we go. And finish off that finger, and then you will work the index finger exactly the same way, and the thumb exactly the same way. For the thumb, you'll just pop those stitches back on your needle, pick up in the gap like we did before, and then knit up your thumb in exactly the same manner. So you can now go ahead and finish your glove. And then in the last tutorial, what we're going to do is we're going to deal with all of these myriad ends and sort out the little gaps as well. So get on, finish your gloves, or you can work both of them to that point now, and then I will see you back in the last tutorial where we're just going to do all the finishing work.